John chapter 8 verse 33. They answered him, "We are offspring of Abram and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it you say you will become free?" We are offspring of Abram. You know, it's interesting, the biggest religions on this planet, well, the two big ones is Islam and Christianity. And I mean, there's understandably the Jewish faith. They all three claim to be offspring of Abram, which in a certain sense, and they are in a certain sense, right? And so here's the third one of the Jewish faith, understandably offspring of Abram, claim to be more offspring of Abram than anyone else. Well, at least they can claim as well the bloodline, but the faith line, unluckily, not. So we are offspring of Abram. We've not enslaved to anyone. Yes, that's kind of really absurd. I mean, okay, before I get to the absurdity of that, just let me, to whom did Jesus, or who was the they that said, speak here? It seems on first reading that Jesus was speaking in the previous verse to those who believed in him and because of the words he taught them. Now, I've explained in the Gospel of John that clearly is a good sign. Right? When you believe the words, not the deeds, that's a good sign. And those people believing the words, like the official there in chapter 4, of the Samaritan woman, he believed the word and he went back, right? Samaritan woman believed the words. Salvation, believing the words, right? And ultimately believe in Jesus. So, everywhere clearly in the context of the book of John, believing the words, not the deeds, the words, that's the right thing to do. And they did. So, is it then in the context of the book correct to then say, but, I mean, in the context of the verse, it seems as though they are those who believe. But clearly in the context of the book, that's going to be contradictory. So how do you explain this? It seems as if it's not explainable in a certain sense. Okay? Everything is always explainable if you just think a little bit about it. So you have the Jews. Remember, I said this is the Jews, that group of people who hated God. And so some of them believed. So some of the enemy, now not the enemy anymore, but they're not openly. So they're standing there like Nicodemus. Oh, we need to stand up for the law, but then we said, oh, are you one of those, the Galileans as well, kind of idea? Right? So they were there, but they were not open yet. So you have a group of people, the Jews, standing around Jesus. Some of them believed, but they were still hiding it. And others, they're still the Jews, those who hate him. Okay? So that is the group of people standing, milling around Jesus. So when he is then speaking about they, he is addressing this group of people. Right? Not the they of those inside the group Venn diagram that believed, but the they of the Jews standing around them. Some of them believe, others don't. Majority didn't. Okay? So ultimately then the they who will answer here, because they're all Jews still, those guys still hiding, they didn't know who's the Jews amongst them or not. Okay, and John as well is making a point of this. And it is still a hidden thing, right? They didn't know who they're true because these other guys were hiding. For fear of them, for fear of their own Jews, fear of their own leadership. Okay. So then ultimately the they is not those who believed, but the group of Jews standing there who were his enemies, and that's the they they're addressing. Okay, so they then, they're still the enemies of God. Not those who believed in his word, are then asked to say, well, we have never been enslaved to anyone. And I said it's absurd. So not enslaved to anyone? Okay, let's look at these three. Right? If you're from Northern Kingdom, Assyrians. Okay, now then Jerusalem, Judea, so at least not the Assyrians. They were surrounded by them. The majority of them were enslaved by the Assyrians. It's only Jerusalem who stood out during the time of Hezekiah. So, but let's go. Then the Babylonians came for them, right? After that, the Medians and the Persians. Then Alexander the Great. Then, so in other words, the Greeks. Then, for a long time, the Greeks. Then the Romans. At that stage, they were enslaved. They were slaves in Egypt. We were never enslaved. Abram was not a slave in Egypt. After Abram, they were enslaved in Egypt. How the heck can they so blatantly lie about their own history? They know that they were enslaved, right? They know it, but again, they are those the Jews, who don't believe, who hate still. That's the problem still. So they're lying. That's why I say it's absurd. They know the history. Okay, and this is nonsense. They teach people, but this simple thing, we're not enslaved to anyone. No, you're enslaved. You're enslaved to sin. That's what Paul is going to state in Romans. We're all slaves to sin. And even then, they were enslaved. They were enslaved to Egypt. They were enslaved to so many other nations, empires throughout the years. And I'm not speaking of now. I'm speaking of before, in the times of Jesus, up till then.